All right. Well, good afternoon to all our attendees, and thank you for joining us today for this third installment of our Better Buildings webinar series. Today's session is Speaking the CFO's Language, Building the Case for Energy Efficiency with Financial Decision Makers. My name is Andrew Schulte. I work for ICF International, and I serve as a contractor in support of DOE's Better Buildings initiative, and I will be helping to moderate today's webinar. Kate, if you can go to the next slide. Let's quickly review what we plan to cover in today's session. As many of you know from your own experience, securing funding can be one of the most challenging aspects of energy efficiency projects. So today we're bringing together 3 Better Buildings Challenge partners who offer their financial strategies and tools, and in one case even their seating arrangements, to this audience in the hope that these ideas can facilitate the implementation of energy efficiency and renewable energy projects across your organizations. So the order of events is that USAA Real Estate Company will start us off with an introduction to a calculator tool that they developed initially for internal use and then enhanced in collaboration with EPA and the Building Owners and Managers Association to calculate energy efficiency project metrics that will be meaningful to financial decision makers. Next, Kohl's department stores will share how a small organizational restructuring was able to deliver big results in terms of aligning energy efficiency benefits and financial value. And finally, the University of California, Irvine will share insights on funding projects from a higher education perspective. So we hope that the audience members from all sectors will enjoy the cross-pollination of ideas that we are trying to bring to you through this webinar series. I did want to note that at the very end of the session, we will have some time for question and answer. If you look to the right, towards the bottom of your control panel, you'll see that there is an option for you to submit questions. If you do want to submit those questions, we will be tracking them, and as time allows, we will try and queue them up for our presenters at the end. Next slide, please. All right, so before we begin, I wanted to introduce our presenters from these 3 organizations, USAA Real Estate Company, Kohl's Department Stores, and University of California, Irvine. These are our wonderful presenters who have been so gracious to join us today. As I introduce them, I'm actually going to also open up a quick poll that's going to show up on your screen. This is going to allow us to get a better sense of where you as attendees are all coming from and your role in your organization. So if we could go ahead and launch that, and if I could ask you to please fill it out. That's just one quick question while I go ahead and introduce today's presenters. So first up, we're going to hear from Brenna Walraven, who is the Managing Director and Head of Property Operations at USAA Real Estate Company. Brenna oversees property operations for USAA Real Estate Company's national building portfolio. Her responsibilities include overseeing property management, engineering, insurance, energy and environmental strategy and execution, as well as overall property operations. She has driven the business case for how to successfully lead USAA's national effort in improving energy efficiency and environmental stewardship, resulting in reduced energy consumption by more than 40% and energy savings in excess of $20 million over the past 12 years. These efforts have resulted in 11 Energy Star Partner of the Year awards for USAA Real Estate Company, the most by any real estate company. Next, we're going to hear from Terry Emerson. Terry is the Director of Capital Projects and Energy for Kohl's Department Stores. These teams are responsible for fixture installations, utilities and energy efficiency for all of Kohl's 1,155 stores. During her tenure in the Sustainability Department, her achievements have included the installation of over 140 activated solar power arrays, significant annual per-store energy reductions, and the achievement of 100% green power usage. Kohl's award-winning program includes 5 Energy Star Partner of the Year awards, 6 Green Power Partner of the Year awards, and the 2013 Platts Global Energy Efficiency Award. And our last presenter today will be Wendell Brazzi. Wendell chairs the University of California's Climate Solutions Steering Group, and he leads an award-winning sustainability program in his role as Vice Chancellor for Administrative and Business Services at the University of California, Irvine. UC Irvine received the 2008 Governor's Environmental and Economic Leadership Award for Climate Change, which is California's highest environmental award. And UCI has also earned numerous accolades for sustainability, including a 2009 EPA Environmental Leadership Achievement Award. They've been on Sierra Magazine's top 10 list of greenest campuses for the past 4 years and currently hold the number 3 spot. And the campus currently has 9 LEED Platinum and 8 LEED Gold buildings, which are among the most of any campus in the U.S. Wendell, prior to joining UC Irvine, he was the Vice Chancellor for Finance, Planning, and Administration at UC Santa Cruz from 1978 to 1991. And prior to that, he served as an Associate Director for Administration for the Laboratory for Laser Fusion at the University of Rochester, starting in 1973. So Wendell is positioned well to bring us great insight from the higher education sector, and our group of speakers as a whole is really an all-star cast today to talk about talking the CFO's language and how to make the financial case for energy efficiency improvements in buildings. So if we can go ahead and close out that poll, thank you all who responded. It looks like the majority folks, 31% of those who responded said that they are in energy management, followed by building engineering, and then 4% of attendees are in the finance department. It looks like 53% of the respondents stated that they were in an other role within their company. So thank you for responding to that poll. And if we can head back to the slides, what I'd like to do now is I'd like to cue things up for Brenna Walraven of USAA Real Estate Company, who's going to provide the first case study today. So Brenna, without any further ado, I'd like to hand it over to you.
Thanks, Andrew. Thanks so much, and thanks to everyone involved with the Department of Energy and ICF for the work on putting this webinar together. Really appreciate the opportunity. So why don't we get to the next slide and get right into it, because we have a lot to cover here. And so obviously we're in commercial real estate. We have all types of assets, office, multifamily, hotel, et cetera. And we have a barrier really for us, which was not atypical for the entire real estate industry, which is our focus had historically been really around cost, right? The cost of energy, the cost of performance of a building, and you'd compare that cost versus your budget, you'd compare it versus other buildings in the marketplace, but it was really focused on cost. And we actually believed our buildings were very efficient when we were analyzing them, because they often were at or below the market in terms of not just overall operating costs, but also lower on energy costs than market. And so when you're below market and cost, you know, you think you're competing well, so you think you're performing well. So when we really started understanding that there were more financial benefits around energy efficiency, we realized we needed to expand our perspective around energy efficiency so that we could better capture this tremendous financial benefits as well as tenant comfort benefits, et cetera. So that was our barrier, was not really understanding all of these financial benefits beyond kind of looking at things from a cost perspective. So our solution evolved around needing to provide not only a better understanding, but a better process for expanding that discussion and analysis of the financial benefits, as well as more objectively measuring energy efficiency via the Energy Star benchmarking tool, which enabled us to better assess energy performance, not just in terms of cost, but in real efficiency terms. And what this led to us doing is creating kind of an Excel-based tool, which made it a lot easier for our operating teams to convey key financial metrics that your CFO would want to listen to and would pique their interest. And as I'll describe here in a moment, we then worked with Energy Star and Bowman International to improve that tool to create the Building Upgrade Value Calculator. The outcome and the biggest result of all of this is we certainly get more energy efficiency retrofits done, but it's also changed the discussion and understanding of our organization around energy efficiency. And through partnering with Energy Star and BOMA, we were able to create a more objective, more informed process for improving efficiency, but also for improving financial performance. Again, important to every CFO. Next slide, please. So USAA Real Estate Company has always been committed to performance and execution, both from a tenant perspective, tenant service perspective, and from an energy efficiency perspective, but also as well from an investment perspective. The only way that we know how to improve then is to have a continuous process improvement approach kind of to everything we do, including energy efficiency and overall sustainability. We also have for years looked at overall sustainability as part of our underwriting efforts, so it has been ingrained in a lot of aspects of our business. And we know that if we make real estate more energy efficient and more sustainable, we'll not only lower costs for our tenants, but we can better control temperature, particularly when buildings are full. We can improve indoor air quality through better filtration and maintenance. And all of those boil down to more satisfied tenants, which in our business means more satisfied tenants tend to renew their leases at greater rates, which drives real asset value. And so we needed to incorporate those kinds of concepts into our thought process, again, beyond just looking at what something costs versus a budget, et cetera. And so given the industry norms around focusing on, cost versus budget or cost versus market, we needed to have a more efficient process, and that's how we came to this thought process. We need to help our teams develop a tool that will easily calculate these metrics that we know will be important to financial decision makers in our company. And we would also said, we not only need to calculate those metrics, but we need to make it easier for them to communicate them and message those, and created like a memo format that would explain those, kind of a draft template. But we then had an even better opportunity, which is, hey, EPA Energy Star liked this concept and said, hey, we'd like to work with you to make that more robust and open it up to more folks. And between our partnership with Energy Star and working with BOMA International, turned that into the Building Upgrade Value Calculator. Next slide. At first, I think it's important to understand what the tool does. It calculates key financial metrics that are important not only to real estate, but also to most businesses. And so those are things like return on investment, simple payback, the impact to operating expense costs, the impact on asset values. Those are financial metrics that our teams, and I think most teams, think are important and valuable to understand when making an investment decision. But this tool also provides key information about how the retrofits would improve our Energy Star rating, for example, which can translate into the ability to earn an Energy Star label, but also could even help with LEED for existing buildings, operations and maintenance, or LEED EBOM, as there are minimum Energy Star requirements within LEED. Lastly, the tool takes these key metrics and generates a letter summarizing these financial and other benefits into a Word format that can be edited to meet the user's particular audience. We believe this tool would not only help our teams, but would also be helpful for others in the industry. And today it's not only hosted on the Energy Star website, but it's also referenced in the Building Owners and Managers Association International website, including several types of educational offerings like the BOMA Energy Efficiency Program, or BEEP as it's affectionately called. This tool, or any tool, really isn't going to do it on its own. It's a key point to make. It doesn't just jump off the page and do it for you. It has to be used. So we really wanted to work with our managers to help them prepare the information, understanding the tool, and make the appropriate edits in the letter. But all the basic work could be done very easily and efficiently. And we hoped with our efforts with the Department of Energy's Better Building Challenge that this Building Upgrade Value Calculator would also be beneficial to others trying to better analyze and understand and broaden the broad benefits of energy efficiency, and also have an improved process for doing so. Now we can go to that next slide. So this is kind of the basic input sheet, and you'll notice it's really pretty straightforward and simple. There's really only a few pieces of information that needed to be added or included to complete this form. So a couple things. You gather the cost for the project, you gather the energy savings, the supply savings, if any, labor savings, and you'll have a big chunk of what you need to make this work. And in addition, though, you'll want to include things like square footage for your project, your annual utility bill, as well as your current Energy Star rating for your project. And then lastly, the tool allows you to include any rebates or other incentives. And I'd just like to note for folks that if you are doing a retrofit, incentives are really, we find, very, very helpful. CFOs love getting a rebate or an incentive because it's like getting something on sale. And I just would recommend checking out desireusa.org. So it's DSIREUSA.org because it has all the latest and greatest information around rebates and incentives. Next slide, please. So this is actually completed, that first page, for the FBI Chicago Regional Headquarters buildings. And I think what's interesting, you may be saying, well, hey, Brenna, where did you get all that cost-saving information, and how did you come up with that? And I think it really can be easier than you think, and that is, ask those bidders that are bidding on your project as part of your specification for the bid. Ask them to provide you estimates of savings. Again, energy savings, labor savings, supply savings. So if I'm doing a lighting retrofit and I don't have to change bulbs because I have a 5-year warranty, and so my probability of having to change lights over the next 5 years goes down, that means my lighting supply purchases go down, and the labor, my engineers have to stop what they're doing because lights tend to be important for people working and have to race go do that. You got to try to capture those additional savings. So ask your bidders to provide that and provide the assumptions as to how they came up with those savings numbers so that you can kind of do the gut check, hey, does that make sense? Isn't it reasonable? And include that in your tool. And I think the other final point that I'd make on this slide is you'll see over there the financial information section. The tool was set up with some basic assumptions around analysis term, which is 10 years, discount rate, which is 8, and capitalization rate, or the cap rate as it's more commonly known in the market, is at 7%. All of which, by today's standard, is fairly conservative, but it is something you could adjust if you feel, based on your investment criteria, it's a different setup. Further, most firms, I would say, in real estate in particular, don't use debt to finance energy retrofits, but the tool does allow you to take advantage of how to calculate the impact of debt on a deal. And so with the new contracting models like an energy performance contract, for example, which has been used in the public sector for some time, but not as much in the private sector, you can calculate the impact of that to your deal as well. So once you've input this information, you can see there on the button it says calculate. You hit calculate, and then you'd go to the next slide and see what you get. Yeah, I don't think if you calculate you'll get anything on the PowerPoint, but here it is. This is the output that the system puts. So as you can see at the top, it kind of touches on how much your operating expenses are reduced and how much the asset value has been enhanced. And then you'll see some more of the particulars. And I think a couple that I'd like to jump out that, again, if you're a financially minded person, asset manager, or certainly a CFO, which is not only that it's a simple payback of about 2 years, but that it will increase our asset value by over $1 million. And secondly, that it has a 49% return on investment. And I don't know about you, but if somebody said to me, hey, Brenna, your 401k, if you invest in this project, you can get a 49% return on investment, and it's pretty low risk because energy efficiency really is pretty low risk, I think we'd take that all day long. And I think that's what we've seen is appealing to those kinds of key metrics that really are important for investment decision making and showing really the financial value of a retrofit like this one is compelling. If you go to the next slide, what also happens is a letter, and there's a tab that you hit, Generate Letter, comes out. Now you can edit this letter. The reason it's important, obviously it doesn't spit it out on our letterhead, but we certainly printed it on our letterhead. But we made some edits around it, but most of the information you're seeing on this letter is system generated, and it's from those key metrics that are generated from the building upgrade value calculator. So now you have a letter that summarizes in a very efficient way the financial benefits, and you have this Department of, Energy Star approved or government approved mechanism for calculating those returns, which helps give it a little more validity, at least in our case. I certainly felt that was the case. So if you go to the next slide, I'll show you one more example real quickly here. And this was for a project that we just did a couple of small projects, occupancy sensors, light timers in the elevators, and a building-wide lighting retrofit. I think what was important to note about this one is the Energy Star rating on this building was a 60. And so it wasn't eligible for the Energy Star rating. It was performing on cost basis. We were actually below market in terms of overall cost and utility cost, but really low on our Energy Star rating. And so we knew we needed to do some improvements. So this was kind of one of the first steps that we took. And so again, you hit calculate. The next page pulls up. So next slide. And you can see we could save over $50,000 a year, a little over a 3-year simple payback. But again, a 32% return on investment, pretty compelling, and again, fairly low risk. And then again, if you click that button, generate letter, and go to the next slide, you'd get a letter that kind of highlights these key metrics. It tells you what the retrofit is about, next slide, and then kind of highlights what those key metrics are, auto-generated. So if you go to the last slide, I think, what is this, how do you measure success? And I think certainly the best way to measure it is in the terms of more approvals for energy investment. But I also think what's as important is we were getting our team members broadly, and that's not just people in the field and managing the assets, but certainly our asset managers, portfolio managers, and other key leaders to think more broadly about issues of energy efficiency and the impact to overall financial performance and how that really helped us execute. And for us, the outcomes, is touched on in the bio and when we got on, which we've saved over $20 million, and we've reduced our energy consumption by cumulatively by over 43% across our portfolio. But as important, we have Energy Star Leaders recognition for a 9th straight year. We've had a 12%, in fact, improvement in our leaders average leaders energy performance rating over last year alone. And we've continued to move our portfolio average rating from a 48 average rating on Energy Star to a 90 this past year. So an 88% in real efficiency gains. So those are all driven by a combination of things, but it certainly was using a tool in a more simplified way of expanding our use and understanding of energy efficiency by using the Building Upgrade Value Calculator. Thank you.
All right, and Brenna, thank you so much for your overview of the Building Upgrade Value Calculator and the way that it has been used and really integrated pretty comprehensively into the day-to-day operations at USAA Real Estate Company. So it looks like we've had a couple questions coming in for you that we will queue up for discussion at the end of this session. But for now, I'd like to move forward and hear from our second presenter, Terry Emerson from Kohl's Department Stores. Terry, I'd like to turn the microphone over to you.
Great. Thank you, Andrew. And just kind of jumping off of Brenna's idea about how we can look at energy efficiency differently with different team members, I'm going to be talking about how finance is our friend here at Kohl's Department Stores. So if you can go to the next slide then. Hopefully everybody in the audience here knows about Kohl's. Maybe you've shopped there, bought something on sale, bought something with a coupon. But we operate 1,155 stores in 49 states. We have 9 distribution centers, 4 e-fulfillment centers. We are headquartered in Menominee Falls, Wisconsin, which is just outside of Milwaukee. And last year we had over $19 billion in sales, and we have about 140,000 associates. And if you're not familiar with Kohl's, we are a family-focused, value-oriented specialty department store, and basically we sell pants and socks and KitchenAid mixers. So if you can go to the next slide, please. So I don't alone in saying that one of our biggest challenges in completing projects that we know will save energy is getting funding. Not everybody realizes that energy efficiency technology moves pretty swiftly. And in some cases, by the time that you have everyone sign off on a project, a better or a different technology has been released. Or really, in the case of retail, we've run up against our kind of blackout period between October and December, where we cannot implement projects in our stores because of the holiday sales season. So that's been our challenge. Our barrier was really acquiring consistent future funding for sort of unknown energy efficiency projects that would have a 2-year or better simple payback. So this is a pretty common issue because finance and sustainability really have different focuses. Theirs really is purely financial. We really want to get projects completed in that quick time period. We came up with a solution to strengthen the partnership between the finance and energy teams by embedding a financial analyst within our department. Can you go to the next slide, please? So a few years ago, we had an open position on our energy team, and we knew that we wanted a financial-focused person to fill that spot. We came up with the idea to fill the position with a financial analyst. This person would still report to finance, but they were physically seated with the energy team. So having the financial analyst physically seated in our department allowed them to overhear all of our energy efficiency discussions and to be invited to impromptu meetings with vendors to learn about new technologies. The analyst became a part of the communication liaison then between finance and our department. They were also writing up all of our capital expense requests, and eventually their role evolved into doing all of the budgeting and forecasting for our electricity, natural gas, and water spend. Through the analyst, we also learned about a statistical analysis tool that has a database with a variety of store attributes like climate zone, square footage, and sales that other departments in our company utilized as a selection tool for testing projects. So not only were they completing all of our financial analysis of our projects, but they were also assisting in the selection of which stores we implemented energy efficiency projects. Next slide, please. So when you have your sitting within your department, you're obligated to become pretty transparent with all of your energy data. We utilize a third-party company for all of our billing and payment of utilities, and we provided our analysts access to that database. So now not only were they writing our capital expense requests and budgeting and forecasting our utility spend, but they also had access to all of our data to validate previous projects and also check the accuracy of our ROIs. Next slide, please. So we've seen several benefits from having an integrated financial analyst. We assumed we would see decreases in approval times, but one of the unforeseen benefits was an increase in our credibility. So after completing a few successful projects, finance started asking us, well, what's next? What new technologies are out there? And really, best of all, do you need more money? Not a lot of energy teams get to hear those beautiful words coming from their finance team. because they understood that there will always be energy efficiency projects to be done, we were able to establish an emerging technologies budget. So each year we have capital money earmarked for 2 or 3 new programs that we can pilot in 10 to 20 stores. Then if those pilots go well, we're able to get capital funding for projects on a larger scale, like 100 to 200 locations, depending on the financing. So the idea of embedding finance into our department revolves around relationship building. We created a partnership with our finance team with the ulterior motive getting things done faster, but it has benefited us both as now this model has been implemented throughout the company. Because the model worked so well, every department has an embedded financial analyst. So, and those groups are now called the Business Unit Finance Group. And that's it.
Terry, thanks. And that really is a really exciting case study that I think has some potential for replicability in other organizations. And certainly we are getting some questions in from our attendees, which we'll pass along to you for to be addressed during the Q&A session. But thank you for providing us such a great overview of this exciting initiative at Kohl's. All right. Well, with that, I think we'd like to move along to our third speaker of the day, Wendell Braze from the University of California, Irvine, to talk about making the financial case from the standpoint of a higher education organization. So, Wendell, if I could turn the mic over to you, it's your show.
Thank you, Andrew. If you go to the next slide, which is my first, yes, thank you. I'm going to expand on some of these points shown on this slide in later slides, but I just wanted to list here what I've found are the critical success factors in whether an ambitious and aggressive energy efficiency program goes forward. Now, I'm speaking from a higher education perspective. It turns out that I'm speaking right now from the Big Ten Environmental Stewardship Conference in Columbus, Ohio at The Ohio State University. So I'm very familiar with what the Big Ten is doing from this conference. I've talked to a number of other business officers and chief financial officers in higher education and across the University of California. What I've been fascinated with is why some institutions are making good progress and why others have stalled out. In some cases, they've done the easy things and then they've just sort of stalled. And these reasons right here are the difference. When these factors are in place, I tend to almost always see a successful program that's moving forward and making really solid, successful gains in efficiency. When these are not present, that doesn't happen. Okay, I'm ready for the next slide. Could I have the next one?
It's loading.
I'm not seeing the next slide yet. Are you? It's the slide titled "Obtaining Senior Management Commitment."
Yep, Wendell, I think we're having a brief hiccup in the connection. There we go.
Here we go. I see it. I hope everyone else does now. These are a couple of pointers that I'm providing from the standpoint of a CFO. And I don't think this would necessarily be a lot different in the private sector. From listening to my colleagues Brenna and Terry, I think that many of these same things would probably work well in any setting. First of all, CFOs are usually very familiar with the primary business of the enterprise, and in our case, that's research and teaching in higher education. They're much less comfortable with this area, this area of energy and energy efficiency. And so whatever can be done to reduce the perceived risk on the part of the CFO, that's a good idea. One way to reduce perceived risk is to first go forward with projects which I call home run projects, projects which have a proven, assured success rate because they've been done in other institutions that are in comparable climates, in comparable organizations, in comparable kinds of facilities. You don't want to pick a home run project from the opposite end of the continent in a different climate. You want to pick one that will have credibility with your CFO, where the risk that they're worried about is that a project will cost more than you estimate and yield less savings than you estimate. And so a home run project is one that is almost certain to hit both the costs and the projected benefits right on the nose. So start with a proposed set of projects that are home runs. And I think later you'll find out on the website here, there will be a place where you can look at projects, about a dozen projects that we found through a very, very large energy retrofit program are proven projects. The second point is a little bit of psychology, I guess, in a way. The second point has to do with it's important to cite the savings, the secondary benefits beyond utility savings, but don't overemphasize or overstate them too much because that actually raises concern on the part of a CFO. And in fact, I think it's very important to bring up these secondary savings right at the front end. Don't bring them up later when it looks like maybe you need to pile on some additional reasons to fund your project. That looks a little bit fishy to a CFO. They want to see everything up front and, again, not overstated. And finally, take what I'm calling here a portfolio position rather than a project-by-project approach. The point here is that CFOs tend to think at a bigger scale than just singular projects. And I think one point I didn't put on here that I just actually thought of this morning as I was sitting in this conference here in the Big Ten is it's probably good to also agree on a performance goal that has to do with the amount of energy to be saved. How many million, hopefully, kilowatt hours of savings you will achieve by the end of, let's say, a fiscal year. I actually put that kind of performance expectation right into the performance objectives of the person who is responsible in my organization for this program. Ready for the next slide. Okay, now these are the University of California's carbon goals. These are goals that are very much reflective of the fact that we're in California, where California has an environmental policy to reduce the statewide carbon footprint to 1990 greenhouse gas emissions levels by the year 2020. So we're part of that. And also, all the University of California campuses have signed up publicly, gone online, or public rather, that is to say, that they will reach carbon neutrality. And so we have three goals. The 2020 goal is the one that's linked to state policy that I mentioned. The 2014 goal is our own internally imposed milestone goal to make progress by getting to year 2000 levels by 2014. And then as soon as possible after 2020, we're committed to become carbon neutral. So these are very aggressive goals. And that is a set of goals which was board approved by our Board of Regents. It comes with very broad commitment across the institution from faculty, staff, students, and I would say our benefactors and stakeholders as well. Ready for the next slide. So here I've shown you the two different kinds of planning documents that we have. See, one of the things I've noticed when I looked at organizations that were making good progress and those that were not is sometimes the only plan that existed was a very global, strategic, policy-level plan, which is what you see on the right, that plan called Prospectus for a Sustainable Future, which is the overarching plan for the University of California to get all the way to carbon neutrality. And sometimes institutions just had the plan on the left, which is really an implementation plan, which if you opened it would show a list of project by project by project, costs and benefits, and technical descriptions of many projects. It seems to me like success depends upon having both of these. At least in higher education, it's important to have the strategic level plan as well as the implementation level plan. At least in our culture, we need both. Next slide. We have a dedicated capital source. Now, we're not a for-profit. We don't declare a shareholder dividend if we have a surplus. It goes into keeping tuition down and keeping our indirect cost rate charged for federally funded research down. So for us, it's not a matter of using investors' capital. We get our capital from borrowing. And so what the university, this is not just for UC Irvine, this is the chart that shows the entire University of California on the top curve. And on the bottom curve there, that's actually everybody else in the state of California who's involved in this same program. It's called the Statewide Energy Partnership, and it's a major program approved by the California Public Utilities Commission and administered by the investor-owned utilities to do energy retrofit projects statewide in all public facilities. The $178 million you see there is the first 15-year revenue bond finance approved by the regions, and then that was augmented by another $74 million in borrowing. So this is how we fund these things in higher education. This is tax-exempt revenue bonds. A revenue bond, by the way, that's the same kind of bond that we use if we build a new student center or a rec center or new dormitories. It's a bond for which we pledge repayment through pledging utility savings. So it's a very common way to debt finance things in higher education. It shows what happened here when this infusion of capital came along. I mean, the University of California's curve just took off. And by the way, this is not an internal document. This comes from an external consultant's report evaluating some of the reasons that this program has been so successful in the University of California in accelerating the rate of energy efficiency. Next slide. So because we're using debt financing, what I do as a chief financial officer is I've tried to make it simple for facilities people, because I've often seen that projects get stuck and institutions get stuck when there's sort of a gap between the culture or the language or the understanding that exists in facility organizations and in budget offices or chief financial officers' offices. And quite often facilities people are not terribly comfortable with the concept of internal rate of return, because after all, we're not looking at these in the way investment capital is used in a for-profit organization. And even the concept of present value or net present value isn't quite as commonplace. So what we do is keep it simple in the following way. I'm really speaking to the second bullet now, required debt coverage ratios for project approval. The way this works is if we have a passive, what I call a passive retrofit project, that might be something like replacing lighting devices with a more efficient fixture and set of controls. It doesn't require a lot of ongoing fine-tuning, maintenance, recommissioning, or anything of that sort. That's why I call that passive. We require a 1.15 debt coverage ratio, which means that the annual savings in the first year needs to be at least 15% greater than the debt service. And we make that figure higher. I make it higher, actually, for complex new technology retrofits where it might need some fine-tuning or ongoing attention to make sure that it performs optimally. So for something like making a smart building, and we do have a lot of smart building projects, for those I require 1.4 as the debt coverage ratio. Now, that's the only thing I require from my energy team. They know that if they bring any project forward that meets those debt coverage ratios, they will get approved. And the only other requirement I put on them is the requirement that we start, because we have these very aggressive carbon reduction goals that I just showed you a few slides back. They need to start with deep energy efficiency projects. And we call a deep energy efficiency project a project that saves 50% of the associated energy. And we have projects that are on our list that will save 10, 15, and 20%. They're on the back burner right now because we want to go first in order to meet that 2014 goal I showed you a minute ago. We want to meet that goal through, and it will take deep energy efficiency to do that. Let's see. Go to the next slide, please. There are some other important factors here. In higher education, a number of institutions have made this commitment to become carbon neutral. And in some cases, I think what's happened is they've stalled out because the leadership didn't really grasp the true scale of the problem they'd tackled and the true scale of investment needed in order to really take a big bite out of their carbon footprint through energy efficiency. And this is the first thing we need to do if we're going to reduce carbon footprint of the university, because right now renewable energy still costs a lot more and really doesn't have the return on investment that deep energy efficiency has. And we've seen this in many, many examples already. So grasping the true scale is a big factor. In our case, access to debt financing is a big factor. As I said, we don't have investor capital, so we have to do it with debt. We do have debt capacity and credit access, so that's not an issue for us. That may be an issue for some institutions, I realize, and that's why some institutions do prefer a performance contract model. And I understand why that would work better for some institutions. The other advantage of a performance contract model, other than someone else providing the financing, is that you do get guaranteed results that way. And the other thing is they bring in all the technical expertise. We have a staff at UC Irvine of about 8 people that do nothing but energy efficiency projects. So not every institution has that capability or wants to staff up to that level or has the ability to do that. So I can understand the other model, which in our case is primarily performance contracting. And for us, deep energy efficiency is more important than fast payback. Let me just touch on a few other little details that they may seem like details, but they're quite important in getting a project financed. And one thing is that a lot of times energy managers or facilities administrators, when you ask them what the cost of energy is that they're going to put into the calculation that shows how much savings to project on a proposed project, they'll tell you the average cost of energy. And that may be the wrong number to use, because a lot of our projects actually create the most savings in the summer when air conditioning costs for us are a big factor. And in the summer, we have demand charges and time of use charges, which are actually much higher than the average cost of energy over the entire year. So what's important is to look at the last, let's say, the last megawatt hour of procured energy. What that costs is what's going to be the cost avoided by a project that reduces energy consumption. The second kind of savings that we need to, I think, bring right out in the open, it's a little bit harder to nail down with such precision, but the truth of the matter is these deep energy efficiency projects actually solve a lot of what we call deferred maintenance problems. These are unknown, for the most part, problems that we'll find in building control systems, in heating, ventilating, and air conditioning dampers. They tend to be things in the mechanical room or not out in the open. These things are worth at least 10% additional savings on top of whatever kind of energy projection we see. And then a big thing for us, the third thing, is there's a lot of cost avoidance that we can put into the equation because, at least in California, and actually in 26 other states, where there is an RPS requirement, meaning that stands for Renewable Portfolio Standard, which is a policy in many states, including California, to have a certain percentage of renewable power by a certain date. It's really aggressive in California. It's 33% renewable by 2020. Quite a few states have lower numbers, like 15 or 20% by 2020, and there are a few other RPS requirements in other states. But the point is, and also in California, we have cap and trade costs, which are going to be a real market-based form of carbon costs that will actually, along with the RPS requirement, cause electric rates to go up faster than the background price inflation that we expect in California. So if the background price inflation over the next 10 years is, say, 3%, we expect that grid power will go up 2 to 4% more than 3%. In other words, 5 to 7%. And if one has to do a present value analysis, by the way, that would be the number, a very, very important number to put in there, because this is not just a wild speculation. When environmental policies are in place that are going to, in effect, create a cost of carbon which will be embedded in the cost of procured grid power, that's a legitimate thing to include in a cost projection. And then finally, I think it was Brenna who mentioned there are bona fide operational cost savings in quite a few of these energy retrofit projects. In many cases, we've replaced incandescent lamps with LED lamps, which have a lifetime which is 5 or 6 times as long as the incandescent lamp that was replaced. Not only do they burn less energy, but they require almost no relamping expense and almost no replacement costs for well into the foreseeable future. So these are really important costs to include when I say include all the costs right up front. I guess that's it. I'll stop now because I know there are some questions probably waiting to be asked, and thank you.
Wendell, thanks so much for a great presentation to round off what really were 3 all-star presentations from Brenna and Terry and Wendell. So we want to really thank all of our presenters today. As we wrap up these presentations and before we head into a few minutes of question and answers, we do want to point our attendees towards some additional resources that will be available to you as follow-up to this webinar. Next slide, please. As you can see here, there are, for USAA Real Estate Company and Kohl's, you will be able to read their full implementation models on the BBC website. Those implementation models are hyperlinked, and when we send out the PDF of the slides following this presentation, you will be able to click directly through to those implementation models. And UC Irvine has also been kind enough to provide several documents mentioned during Wendell's presentation, including UCI's strategic plan, their implementation plan, and a program assessment. UCI has also shared a list of what they consider to be home run projects, as Wendell called them, that will almost always be approved. And that can be, those might be valuable for you to consider as well, and we'll send that in addition to the rest of the follow-up. And like I said, the web links to these materials will be made available to you, and you can look out for an email from us sometime later this week with all that follow-up information. For the moment, though, what I'd like to do is take a chance to take some time to answer a few of the questions that came in. You guys have been a great audience. We've gotten a lot of questions in. Unfortunately, more than we're going to be able to get to in the time we have available. However, we will try to pick out some of the key ones that we think can benefit the group as a whole. The first question that I'd like to throw out just to the entire group of panelists has to do with specific financial criteria. We have heard discussion of financial criteria such as payback periods and internal rate of return and net present value. Wendell also mentioned debt coverage ratio as an important financial metric. one question we wanted to ask to our panelists is whether there are any additional financial metrics that were not discussed today that you think organizations should consider, in order to give a complete picture of a project's financial impact. Wonder if anybody wants to grab that one.
Sure, Andrew. This is Brenna. I'll jump in there. Aside from return on investment, which is a big one, we actually take a lot into account around tenant impact. So, for example, if we know that by getting more efficient, we can better control temperature, because as many of you may know, we're more densely occupying buildings today than ever before. I mean, they were originally designed to have a bunch of offices in it and a handful of people, and today they've got, 150 million people with 5,000 computers. I'm exaggerating, but you know what I mean. We're more densely occupying, and so if I can better control temperature because I'm getting more efficient and able to better manage that temperature and keep tenants comfort, that is something that we certainly look at. We also are seeing more tenants, particularly in the federal government. So if you're a federal agency, more tenants are requiring Energy Star and LEED certification. So energy efficiency is critical for both of those. Obviously, I need to be rating a 75 and above to be eligible for Energy Star label. And to do well in LEED, I also need to have a high Energy Star score. So those are a couple others. I think lastly, before I turn it over to our other panelist, is the investment strategy for the overall fund or vehicle that takes ownership of the asset. So we have an open-ended fund, our EAGLE fund, which is a long-term hold fund vehicle. So we're going to hold assets theoretically in forever, but certainly 10, 15 years, not 1, 2 years. And in the longer term, energy efficiency is an important way to better manage overall costs, but it's also a better way to maintain an asset, because when you're focused on efficiency, you're paying more attention to managing the asset. That'll do it for me.
This is Terry. I can take a stab at that also. For us, one of the things that we look at in addition to the financial measurements would be customer experience. So there may be, for instance, lighting that is preferred in the jewelry department that helps with sales, or there may be, when we look at rooftop unit replacements, if there's a rooftop unit that has better control of humidity and it means that the control and comfort in the stores is going to improve, we definitely consider that. Other things that we would look at would be maintenance cycles and looking at, I think it was mentioned about the length of time that the LED light bulbs last compared to an incandescent, and the waste reduction that goes along with that you're having to dispose of different types of light bulbs versus leaving the LED in for 5 or 10 years. And then one other thing for us is that we do a carbon reduction calculation, and so that's something we're also looking at.
It's Wendell. I might add that when performing scheduled major maintenance, you reminded me of this when you mentioned the rooftop packaged unit. It's important to understand that since that's an expense that's going to be incurred one way or another, whether it's deferred maintenance or major planned maintenance. So in looking at that, one doesn't have to justify the entire cost of that if the choice is between going with sort of a standard efficiency unit or an advanced high efficiency unit. All one has to look at is the difference in cost and look at whether that meets your investment or payback criteria. And usually that's a pretty good bet that will work when you look at the incremental cost versus the incremental benefit. You don't have to justify the whole thing. And by the way, just as a CFO, let me say that one thing that is maybe it's sort of a pet peeve of mine, but I have seen from people over the years when we have used present value analysis, I've seen a lot of misuse of present value analysis that I think comes from the fact that you can buy so many canned programs where you just plug in a bunch of data and out comes the answer. And I think before someone uses that, it's necessary to just take a short course to understand exactly what all the variables in that kind of calculation intrinsically are supposed to mean, because just plugging in data gets a ridiculous answer sometimes, and that may not be necessary in all organizations. As I've said, we try to make it simple. We use debt coverage ratio because we're borrowing money, and we have to justify projects just based on that simple criterion. But when present value analysis is being done, it should be done right, or it really does actually undermine the credibility that comes with a proposal.
And thanks to all three of our speakers. I might ask one follow-up question. So we've talked about some additional metrics that are critical in communicating the real financial value and the real impact of an energy efficiency project. But all of our speakers today have portfolios with many, many properties. So a follow-on question would be, once you've got these metrics, how are projects prioritized? How do you determine which projects to address first with limited resources?
Well, we just go with the deep energy efficiency projects first, as I mentioned, because we're pursuing this aggressive goal of reducing our carbon footprint.
And for us, I think we're actually just the opposite. So what we're trying to do is do the low and no costs first. And what we find is, one, it builds credibility with our decision makers because they're easy to contract for, easy to execute, and the results obviously come through very quickly, et cetera. So you see the benefit, you see that performance, and you go, okay, now I'm willing to take something that might be more complex. And secondly, especially if you start getting into chiller replacements, we find if we do all the low and no cost and get it tuned up and operating as well as it can be, when we go to replace that chiller or other pieces of equipment, we don't have to get as big a piece of equipment, for example, necessarily. And we were able to more right-size to the changed load and more efficient operation.
And for us, we typically have multiple projects going on at many different sites. And so in order to prioritize each individual project, we will look at cost differentials, things like the cost per kWh or demand cost. In a certain area, they vary significantly across the country, so we'll prioritize with that. We'll look at if there are rebates available, and then we'll take those individual projects and prioritize them based on those financial criteria.
I'll add one point that incentives do help a lot. Things that you can get a rebate or other incentive for kind of rise to the top of the list, because typically incentives don't last forever. It's kind of first come, first serve. And so, again, I use the analogy of something being on sale, and that's essentially what it is. You're getting a discount against the upfront cost of a retrofit, and getting something on sale, and knowing that that doesn't last helps rise it to the top of the list and get approval, maybe sometimes in other ways you wouldn't.
Brenda made a point that I want to follow up on. It was an excellent point that I should have mentioned a minute ago myself, which is when we're doing a major energy retrofit on a building and it has an air conditioning component and a lighting component, we do the lighting first. And the reason is exactly what she said. What that will do for us, because most of our energy demand is for cooling. And so by reducing the heat dissipation of lighting in a building, it reduces the cooling load. So we do that first because then we can right-size the cooling and achieve even more savings in the second phase of that project.
Okay, great. One question that came in that actually is specific to Terry's presentation. Terry, we're wondering, if you encountered any barriers when you initially proposed to embed a staff member from the finance department within the energy team. Did one side or the other, the finance team or the energy team, require any convincing? And how did you overcome any questions or concerns that one or both of the teams might have had?
But I think it's a really good question because staffing and headcount can be a really touchy subject. So there was some, a little bit of negotiating that went on between the finance team and the energy team as far as what specifically this individual was going to work on and how their time was going to be spent. So it really was just a matter of getting that person in the department, starting them in on some of the projects. And really initially the finance team thought the person would be working on utility issues about 50% of their time. And once they got into the role, they realized how much work was involved and how much value they could add to the team. And so in the end, they ended up spending 100% of their time on utility issues. So there was, a little bit of negotiation there, but it was really more a matter of getting that person on board, trying out, what they were going to be working on and seeing that value add.
Great. All right. So, and this may need to be the last question that we ask to our group since, we are after the hour, and I know people may have other meetings that they need to get to. But this is a question for the group of presenters as a whole. So we've talked about sort of the front end of a project. How do you present the financial metrics to get the project approved? But on the back end, how do you determine whether you've met your goals? So for instance, are you using sub-metering for measurement and verification? And if so, has this been a useful tool or strategy for feeding back to the finance department? And if not, why not? And again, this could be for any of our presenters.
Well, I'll jump in. At UC Irvine, we've found that there's a local firm, actually it's in Irvine or Anaheim or Orange County someplace, called Melrock, which has developed a very efficient way of sub-metering. They sell a product which actually clips right on to the feeders inside the breaker panel and then communicates directly through an internet connection the loads on whatever number of circuits you want to monitor. This costs a mere fraction of what metering used to cost. It's accurate to within 1%, and it's allowed us to install thousands of measurement data points on campus. And so we have much more information than we ever had. We know we're getting results because not only do we see the data as soon as we get it from them, and actually they provide the data analysis services to us as well. But also, it's kind of like having real-time commissioning data, because if anything goes bad, it spikes up. We see it. And so that's been really useful for us.
And Brenna or Terry, any thoughts on how sort of back-end sub-metering, monitoring, verification has helped to sort of convince the finance department that energy efficiency really is delivering on its promise?
The way we try to do it is develop. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Terry. Go ahead.
I was just going to say we've done some metering on some large projects. So what we typically will do is we'll try a project, especially if it's a large, expensive project. We'll try it at one location. And at that one location, we may do a lot of sub-metering and measurement. And then if the results pan out, then we'll take that sub-metering, or we'll take that project to maybe 50 stores and not necessarily do the same amount of sub-metering, but we'll monitor more billing information or CT and pulse meter information. And from there, then we'll roll the project out to however many stores it's deemed that it has a good payback. So typically when we do sub-metering, it's only going to be on a fairly large project, and we'll only do it for a limited pilot test, and the rest of them then just build on from there. So
I'll quickly just say that we have not done extensive. We've done some submarine metering because of the expense, although I'm very interested in Wendell's new technology because we've been looking for something that would make it much more cost-effective. The way we look at it is how are our overall energy costs doing, because of course we're still going to focus on cost, and then how are we doing with respect to Energy Star and or if there's a lead goal involved as well. And if those two metrics, for example, in the building that I shared with you in the case study, the second one, it went from a 60 and today it's an 85. And our energy costs are some of the lowest in the market. So those two metrics help tell that those efforts specifically on energy efficiency drove actual results. And so we then try to do case studies or highlight those with investors and our asset managers so that they can highlight them with investors. So that's how we typically do it.
Well, thanks to our presenters for staying in the line and answering some great questions from the audience. We really appreciate the time that you put into this. Before we part today, I would like to just go to one or two further slides, if we can move ahead. I wanted to let everybody know that we will be having our next Better Buildings webinar on Tuesday, November 5th. The topic will be intra-organization energy efficiency competitions, talking about how a little rivalry can go a long way when it comes to reducing building energy use through behavior change. And it'll provide an opportunity to hear from the City of El Paso, from LeGrand, and also from the U.S. EPA, which will be there to talk about the Energy Star Energy Efficiency Competition Guide. So if we can move to the last slide as our attendees move on to their next appointment today, we did want to let you know that if you do have any questions, questions that didn't get answered today, please do feel free to contact us. The best place to get us is at the address up on the screen, Better Buildings Webinars at ee.doe.gov. But you can also see that we've provided contact information for the DOE program leads as well as the program support staff. So again, Better Buildings Webinars at ee.doe.gov. And again, these slides will be provided to you as a follow-up to today's session. You should be looking out for them a little bit later this week, and that email address will be provided there as well. So with that, I want to draw today's session to a close. I want to say another hearty thanks to Brenna Walraven, Terry Emerson, and Wendell Brazzi for 3 great presentations. We hope that all of you have had the opportunity to hear about some strategies that both interest you and potentially could take root within your own organizations. That's the goal of this webinar series. So we thank you for attending, and we hope you'll join us again for the next one on November 5th. And in the meantime, have yourself a great rest of the week, and we look forward to talking with you soon. Thanks so much, everybody.